Hey everyone, and welcome to MAC 1105. We're going to work today on section 1.1, and this is linear and rational equations. So I want to just go through and explain what a linear equation is. So an equation indicates that two algebraic expressions are equal. So whenever you see something that's where you have an equal sign, you call that an equation. So linear equations in one variable is an equation that can be written in the form ax plus b equals c, where a, b, and c are real numbers. And most important, a can't be equal to 0. If a is equal to 0, then you can see that what you would have here would be, you wouldn't have an x, you would just have like 1 equals 1. So it's important that a is not equal to 0. Everything here, if you notice, is to the first power. So we don't write to the first power, but we assume if there's no exponent that it is to the first power. So that's what makes something a linear equation, okay? And what we're talking about here is a linear equation with only one variable. So we can see this is also a linear equation because the y is our variable and it's to the first power. And here, again, the same thing. A is our variable, it's to the first power. This would not be an equation because it doesn't equal anything. That's what we would call this just an expression. We can't solve expressions, they just are. But we can solve equations. So we're gonna learn how to do that today. So if I want to solve this equation, basically, I'll show you the steps. The first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the parentheses. Let me put it like that. So the first step is eliminate parentheses. So again, how do I do that? Well, whenever I have something that looks like this, I have to distribute. We're going to distribute those, the 5 to the x minus 6, because that's going to help me eliminate my parentheses. So the first thing I'll do is I'll distribute. So when I distribute, what that means is that this 5 gets distributed or gets multiplied by both terms. So we end up with 5x minus 30. So 5x, because I multiply 5 times x, and then minus 5 times 6 is 30. That gets written, now I don't need that parenthesis anymore. Minus 2x equals 3. And then now we have this minus in front of the parentheses. And you could really look at it as there's like a minus 1 in front, and we're going to distribute that. So a negative 1 times x would be negative x, and negative 1 times positive 1 is negative 1. So now I've distributed. And the next thing I want to do is I want to combine like terms. So again, what does that mean? Well, I can see here on the left-hand side that I have a 5x minus 2x. So 5x minus 2x is positive 3x. So that basically takes care of this and this. Okay, and then minus 30 equals, and I'm going to again combine like terms on the right hand side. So I have 3, so I have this 3 minus 1, which gives me 2 minus x. Okay, Now I want to get all my variables on the same time, on the same side, and everything else on the other side. So I'm going to, what could I call this? Isolate my variable. So whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So here I'm going to get my x's to the left-hand side. So I leave the 3x there, but I'm going to add x to both sides. So I get 4x minus 30 is equal to 2, and minus x plus x cancel. So that's why I added x, so that I could get rid of that x on the right-hand side. Now I need to get that 30 away from the x, because we want to get x on one side and everything else on the other. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to add 30 to both sides. So I get 32. And on the left-hand side, these are going to cancel, and I get 4x. So notice I'm just really doing opposite operations. I'm going to always do adding and subtracting first here. Let me see. So let me see. I'll say we're going to add and subtract first. And the reason is because we don't want to multiply or divide first. Then we'll start making fractions. I don't want to make fractions. I want to notice I still don't have any fractions. Now 4x is the same as 4 times x. So I do the opposite operation, which is division. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And these cancel. And I end up with x equals 32 over 4 is 8. And that is my final answer. Okay, so I would say add, subtract first, multiply and divide second. Okay, so that takes care of problem number 1. Number 2. Now, some of you might think, oh no, fractions. Usually that happens. Don't worry. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to follow our steps. So what were our steps? We're going to eliminate the parentheses by distributing, basically. We're going to combine like terms. We're going to isolate the variable using addition and subtraction first and multiplication and division second. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute. So I have 1/3 times 1 is 1/3 minus 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. And you can write that as 1/3 x or x over 3. Let me see. So 1/3 x is the same as x over 3. So whichever way you want to write it is fine. And then we have minus x plus 1 over 2 equals -2. Now notice really what we have here is fractions. Actually, I'm going to rewrite this as x over 3. I think this might help. It's exactly the same. Now, whenever I want to add or subtract fractions, I need a common denominator. Okay, so for this one, my common denominator, I always want to find my LCD. So this is for adding or subtracting fractions. So my least common denominator here is going to be 6, because my denominators are 3 and 2, They have no factors in common. So I'm just going to multiply them together and I get 6. Now, the easiest way to handle this is, so here, let's do this. So this is number 1. I want to find my LCD. Number 2, I'm going to multiply both sides by my least common divisor. Okay, so here, let's do it. So I'm going to multiply this side by 6, and I'm going to multiply this side by 6, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to distribute. I get 6/3 minus 6x over 3 minus 6 times x plus 1 over 2 is equal to, and this I could just say -2 times 6 is -12. Now, why did I do that? Because I can cancel. I can say 6 over 3 is 2. And again, 6 over 3 is 2, so I have 2x. And here, I can cancel, let's do it like this. So I can cancel this 6 and this 2, and that would give me 3 times x plus 1 is equal to -12. Okay, let's keep going. I have 2 minus 2x, and now I'm distributing that -3 into the terms in the parentheses. So I get -3x minus 3 equals -12. And now I'm going to combine like terms. So here I have, here, let's see. I have 2 minus 3, which is -1. And then I have -2x minus 3x, which is -5x. And that's going to equal -12. I'm going to add 1 to both sides because I'm isolating my x. These cancel. And I get, let me do it this way, I get -5x equals -11. And then I'm going to divide both sides by -5. The -5 and the -5 cancel, and I get x equal. Now, the way that signs work for division is exactly the same way they work for multiplication. So a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative divided by a negative is positive. So basically, these negatives cancel, and I just end up with x equals 11/5. Okay. And now we have decimals. So there's a couple of different ways to handle decimals. One way that you might like is, if you notice, I can get rid of the decimals. Okay, so I can do it either with decimals or without decimals. And maybe for this example, I'll do it both ways. So let's do it first with decimals. So again, I just begin, I'm going to distribute. So I get 0.1y minus, and then if I multiply that, I get 0.2 plus 0.03y minus 0.12 is equal to 0.02 times 10 is 0.2. Okay, now that looks kind of complicated. Actually, I think I'm only going to do it one way. I think I'm going to show you how to do it the easiest way. So I look at my decimals and I say, well, this is tenths, this is tenths, hundredths, and tenths, right? So basically decimal point and one number after it, or a decimal point and 2 numbers after it. Since the smallest I have is the decimal with 2 numbers after it, what I want to do is multiply both sides by 100. If I multiply both sides by 100, then every time I multiply by 10, I move the decimal 1 place to the right. So for example, if I have 0.1 times 100, that's going to equal, and what I'm going to do is I have 2 zeros here, so I'm going to move this 2 places. So that gives me 10. Okay, let me do it without. So if you look on your calculator, I have 2 zeros. I'm going to move this 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places. And wherever I don't have a number, I'd put in a 0. Hopefully that made sense. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 100. And now, just like I showed you, 0.1 becomes 10y minus, and then I'm going to move this 2 decimal places to the right, so it gives me 20, plus, if I move this 2 decimal places to the right, I end up with 3y. And again, if I move that 2 decimal places to the right, I get 12. And that equals 0.2 times 100 is 20. And now I no longer have decimals. And I think this is the easiest way to do it. So now I'm going to combine my like terms. I have 10y plus 3y is 13y. And then I have minus 20 minus 12 is minus 32. And that still equals 20. I'm going to add 32 to both sides. These cancel. I get 13y equals 52. Divide both sides by 13. And I get y equals 52/13, which is equal to 4.